clean up air pollution. Is it poor households benefiting? Is it rich households benefiting? So one way we could look at this is, do housing rents respond as much as prices, house prices? There's, it's kind of the newer, better evidence we have is that rents don't seem to go up as much as house prices, which in this one sense is giving low-income renters a benefit, improved air quality, without them having to pay for it. A lot of quality research being done, it appears to find contradictory results. And one thing that might be leading to this confusion, or I'm going to argue, is that how we measure exposure to pollution matters a lot. These white dots here are monitors, and each of these little pink crosses is a major polluter. The problem is that we're trying to estimate a 100th order polynomial with 3 data points. They're clearly not aligned to try to pick out, so that the average of all those monitors corresponds to the average exposure in the county. What should we actually do? Well, in this paper, I'm going to use an atmospheric dispersion model, which is uses the work of atmospheric chemists and physicists to predict, given wind conditions and temperature and barometric pressure and so forth, once a puff of gas comes out of a smokestack, where does it go? And then we can take that prediction, sum it across all firms, and get the total exposure to industrial pollutants. What I do here is actually take the 2 monitors I do have in my sample area and plot over time the prediction here in blue and the actual monitor reading in red. You can see is that it does pretty well. What we're essentially going to be doing is rolling a diff and diff backwards. Instead of starting at parity and separating people into exposure, non-exposure, we're taking people in exposure and non-exposure and bringing them closer back to parity. The instrument I'm going to use is this pre-period exposure. It's a measure of basically how downwind are you from a large plant before the program starts, interacted with a post dummy for after the shock. So what I find here, right, is that these are just OLS with controls. It's all muddy and gross. If we look at the actual shock, the reduced form, we see that in areas that got a bigger cleanup, population went down, the number of households went down, the number of housing units went down, and the fraction of people in low-income households went down and shifted to higher-income households. So if we break down the actual population changes by, is it poor people, middle-income people, or high-income people leaving, we actually find it's predominantly poor people leaving. And we see these large rent increases, see people flowing out in mass, and see very little home ownership among these low-income neighborhoods. All suggest that this is not a terribly progressive